Hello, everybody. How are you? How are things in your world? I hope good. Folks, life is amazing. It's fun. It's exciting. But everybody has their bucket list. And I'm going to suggest five amazing towns you should visit in Alberta before you die. And possibly you'll want to put these towns on your bucket list. Here we go. Now, if you're not familiar with Alberta, Alberta is a province in Canada. It's the second from the left as you look at the map. That means it's next to British Columbia. British Columbia is on the western seaboard. And the Canadian Rockies separate British Columbia from Alberta. It's got the Rockies in the west, and on the right side of Alberta is the province of Saskatchewan. Red Deer, Alberta has every 2 weeks in July the Red Deer Painting Festival. Now, this is an exciting time for the whole family because they invite people from all over the world to come to Red Deer to help paint the deer red. Now, how does it work? You should, if you're going to go, your best option is to bring a four-wheel drive truck, an ATV, an off-road motorbike, or any vehicle along those lines, because this is how it works. The whole family piles in these off-road vehicles and they go chasing the deer. Now, I'll be honest with you, the locals are the best at this, and I suggest you get on YouTube and watch people how they do it. But they start chasing the deer at high speed in rough terrain as fast as they can go in their off-road vehicles. Then as they get up toward the deer, they jump in the air and start pedaling their feet in the air really fast so that when they hit the ground, they can catch up to the deer running. Then they jump on the deer, grab a can of spray paint out of their camouflage vest, and start painting the deer red. You want to cover the deer as much as you can, avoid the head so the deer can see, avoid the head, but paint the rest of the deer. Now, you're not going to be able to paint where you're sitting and riding the deer. So what you're going to want to do is then hang on to the deer as best you can, paint the rest of the deer, and then let yourself fall to the wayside. Watch out for the hooves. Turn your head to the side. Guys, it's amazing. It's fast-paced. It can be incredibly dangerous, and that's why people love it, the Red Deer Painting Festival. Watch those videos. You're going to be amazed. Then there's Banff. Now, a lot of people know about Banff, a famous resort area, mountainous town, mountainous area of the Canadian Rockies. It has beautiful vistas, incredible scenery, world-class skiing, and the accommodations for everybody from the campers that want to camp in the campground to a five-star hotel. But the first question everybody poses every year is, how did it get its name? Every Canadian's tired of answering this question, and finally we're going to give it to you so you can just refer them to this video. In the early days, until still to this day, but certainly in the early days, the area had two things on the mountains that made it unique and incredibly beautiful. Groups of rocks all over the mountaintop, and then below that, the incredibly beautiful green fir trees that created this beautiful contrast. And in the early days, as they climbed the Canadian Rockies on the way to British Columbia to get to Vancouver to start the Vancouver Canucks hockey team, this was in the early days, like the 1690s, okay, they would walk along the top of the mountain. What happens? A pebble gets loose. It hits another pebble. Next thing you have is an avalanche of boulders coming down the mountain. Now, in most places, they would just crash at the bottom of the valley. What happened in Banff? They hit those beautiful trees. They cushioned the blow, and it made more of a sound like Banff. So picture the rocks coming down, the boulders screaming down the mountain, but they don't crash at the bottom. They go Banff. And that was the start of the name, and now it's a world-class area. Folks, all along the Canadian Rockies, you're going to find beautiful vistas, but you really can't deny that Banff and Jasper have the best. Jasper is just as good as Banff, if not better, probably not as well known. Jasper was named after a thespian, that is an actor. In the early days, the pioneer days, you had gold miners, you had timber workers, you had guys that would pick up the trash with a nail on the end of a stick. And all of these men and women in the pioneer, there's nothing to do. So they created a local theater, local community theater. Jasper was the best looking guy in the area. So they said, you should be the leading man. So they did the same thing with the leading lady, the best looking lady in the area named Louise. And Jasper and Louise, although married to different people, met at the local community theater. And after production, where they were the best, where they were the leading man and leading lady, they started to fall in love. And it created a scandal. Okay, but ultimately it worked out. They married each other, divorced their not as good looking partners, married each other, had some very good looking children. And that's why so many people in the Jasper area are very, very attractive because they're descendants of Jasper and Louise. And Louise was almost as famous as Jasper, and they named Lake Louise after her. Amazing. Guys, run up to Jasper. You're going to love it. Now, Fort Saskatchewan, you're saying, wait a minute. I thought this was Alberta towns. Well, believe it or not, Fort Saskatchewan is in Alberta. So Fort Saskatchewan was originally in the neighboring province on the eastern side of Alberta, the neighboring province called Saskatchewan. It was a fort built by the Canadian government on the prairie, just like any fort during the westward migration to protect the pioneers and the soldiers, the lands, and everything around there. But there's nothing around there. You could stand on one side, let's say in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, throw a giant marble the size of a basketball toward the eastern seaboard. You could watch it roll all the way to Winnipeg. It's that flat, that vast, that empty, and that boring. So what do? You start drinking Molson Goldens. And they were drinking, we're talking the early days. This is probably like 1790, 1800. They got 1,500 cases of Molson Golden Ale. And right around 1 o'clock in the morning, somebody said, you know what we should do? This would be a funny prank. We should pick up the fort piece by piece and move it from Saskatchewan into Alberta. It'll be a riot because the captain is going to wake up and the whole fort will be moved. Well, the captain woke up. He was not amused. He was not happy. And several people got court-martialed and a few others got shot. Okay. But then the Canadian government said, well, listen, we got westward migration anyway. The people are going west. So the fort was moved from Saskatchewan to Alberta in a westward fashion. Let's just go with it. And they kept it. And it's been there ever since. Amazing. And finally, Leduc, which in the old French version of the Canadian language, remember the Canadian language has both an English version and a French version. Now, this isn't the French that you learned in school, okay? Because the Canadian language is very difficult to understand. I speak it a little bit. Leduc is a combination of a French word that means the two, and originally it was Leduc Allemand, which is a bastardization, to be honest with you, of the Inuit word for ground. Leduc Allemand, and over time, just to make it shorter, people just started calling it Leduc. Because Leduc is, again, it's out in the vast emptiness of the Canadian prairie. You have to understand, Canada is this huge country. It's bigger than China and Africa and Russia put together. Canada is that big. And in those days, Leduc was so remote that it was susceptible to all kinds of dangers. So when pioneer families came over the hill, over the vast slate-top table that is Saskatchewan and got to Leduc, they had to protect themselves, and they developed the 2 ears to the ground method. That's when the leading pioneer jumps off his horse, puts one ear to the ground, and then turns his head and puts the other ear to the ground. That was developed in Leduc. It's a double safety method of listening for incoming marauders, stampeding bison, any of those dangers. Okay, liberals, a stampede of liberals coming over the prairie. That's the two ears to the ground method. It was developed right there in Leduc. Now, to this day, you can go to Leduc. You can go and hire any number of Pioneer Days reenactment companies that will take your family on a mini Pioneer Trail, and they'll even teach you how to do the two ears to the ground method. Now, if you're a family, if you're a father, your mother, consider this trip because kids love it. They love to jump off the horse, jump off the wagon, put one ear to the ground, and then they turn their head and put the other to the ground. And sometimes the little kids will go, Dad, Pa, they'll say, Pa, I hear incoming bison, or I hear a stampede of liberals. So it's very fun for the whole family. Guys, there they are, Leduc, Fort Saskatchewan, Jasper, Banff, and Red Deer, the famous Red Deer Painting Festival, are all 5 amazing towns you should visit in Alberta before you die.